Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast. My name is Ben Jackson, and once again, I will be your host, and I'm joined by Scott and Joris. Guys, how are you doing this evening?
Very well. I hope everyone is too. Another week closer to the playoffs, and the tension is arising.
On both ends of the table, definitely. So as well. So yeah, let's go in. Dive in.
Absolutely. It was the beginning of the classic cycling season as well, but there weren't too many classics on the pitch, I have to say, unfortunately. But let's start on Friday night, where Charleroi they lost at home to Genk 1-0. Molenbeek and Leuven, big relegation battle. That one finished 1-1. Sint-Truiden celebrating 100 years, battered Westerlo, but only won 1-0. Mechelen beat Kortrijk 3-0 at home. Anderlecht left it late to beat Club Brugge in the clasico. Ghent and Antwerp drew 2-2. Union beat Standard Liège 2-1, and then Cercle Bruges beat Eupen by 2-0. Let's start in Charleroi then. Felice Mazu has said that the side just needs 6 points for their last couple of games, which looked all right when you looked at kind of how many games they had left, but now they've only got 3 games left and they need to win 2 of those. It's like, oh, are they going to be able to do it? They faced Genk at home, and this one probably should have been more than 1-0, let's be honest. Genk finished the game with 19 shots, 7 of which were on target. Herve Coffey made quite a few saves. I believe, 6 saves that he made in this one. So the cat was kept quite busy. And anyone who has cats know that they don't like to be busy. They quite like to just kind of sit there and do nothing. But unfortunately, he had to do a lot against Genk. It just took a while for them to finally score. Colin Saw comes on in the 71st minute, he finds the net. Zakaria El Ouadi with another assist, 2-2. Really nice ball in, actually. One of those really teasing crosses that just bounces in the right place. Saw with a really nice finish, actually, because how many times, guys, do we see when the ball bounces before someone strikes it that they then just balloon it over the bar? He puts it past Coffey. Absolutely nothing he could do about that one with the strike there. Finishes 1-0 to Genk, which it's just a perfect way to start the weekend for them, seeing as though it just immediately put pressure on all the other sides above them to win because they were able to jump into that top 6, which is what they're chasing. Very, very good win for Charleroi. It's just, again, it put kind of pressure on the other sides around them, but in a different way because they had this chance to kind of take some points away from them. But unfortunately, not many teams did. And thankfully for them, they're still very, very much in it. But it could easily have been way more than 1-0. And I think you even said to us, Joris, like, this side could really go down. Talking about Charleroi, obviously, not Genk.
Yeah, that's mathematically not more possible anymore, I think. But yeah, at times this season, maybe I would have said the same. But also, well, for once, it seems like I was a bit optimistic in whatever I said last week about the playoffs and so on. But somehow, in optimistic in a Genk fan way here. But it looks like actually everything has more or less turned out how I at least hoped it would turn out, and that more or less said it could turn out. Let's see if that happens for the remainder of the season as well. I fear not, but I'm happy that at least, people will understand now what I meant last week, because in other hypothetical situations, it could have turned out a bit differently, completely different scenarios. But what's to mention in this game? I think was also not really great. Admittedly, could have won a bit more, but the pitch also didn't really allow to play a lot better. Not going to use it as an excuse, but still it doesn't help. But what worth mentioning, the highlight for Charleroi, probably the pyro show before the game. Well, actually, from both ends, both fan groups had a really nice pyro show before the game started. Also, a bit the way you like to have your pyro shows before the game, not interrupting your game, for as well. And for Charleroi, well, in addition to, they have to play on that pitch even more than the away sides, obviously, but also, they really have injuries everywhere, even before the game as well. Of course, like Sorgan is still not there. A few others were already out during the game. Van Kleinpoet got injured again as well, and there was another player whose name I'm now forgetting, I think, but at least I think there was another injury that they caught during the game. Knezovic, it might have been. But It's all just it's time that the season ends for them, but hopefully for them it's indeed their performance was really 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 bad. Can't say much. Apart from Kortrijk, which was at that time still a different Kortrijk. Probably the weakest performance I've seen against King this season. I would say and that's where that's of course my comment came from. But of course, they really could go down if they get stuck into the relegation playoffs. They really might. Hopefully for them by that time, some of these injuries will have resolved themselves. And for Genk, two wins in a row, right on time before the difficult game against Club Brugge. Especially now, I already wrote that down before. The Club Brugge had lost their own game, to give another spoiler, but now that scenario hasn't fallen. So they could overtake Club even if they would win the home game against them. Of course, it's also 2 wins in a row against sides you would expect them to win, but well, at least they did. There has been time during the season they did not do that even, so that's definitely some confidence back. And so Ben mentioned it, scoring with his first touch, and also Ben mentioned already as well the cat. More what you might call in Dutch, at least, probably doesn't work in English, otherwise Ben would have probably alluded to it, but like with something you might call a cat's leg, so the cat beaten by another cat in a sense. But a really nice finish, of course, from him. And okay, and a clean sheet, always good as well. Somehow Henk is not doing so bad in that department either. But we'll talk about clean sheets a bit further on as well. At least I will bring it up at some point.
It's all set up very, very nicely for the big playoff one showdown, or two sides who are hoping they'll finish in playoff one, Genk and Club Brugge next weekend. That game's just become so much more important, as Joris was alluding to, and we'll circle back round to that later. There's no doubt about that. On Charleroi, just another performance where they just didn't deserve to get anything out of the game. It's kind of been the story of their season, really. I'm glad both of you mentioned Herve the Cat Coffee, because he had a pretty standout game, as he's done a lot of weeks this season, and he's needed to. I thought Jeremy Petrice had a decent game as well. But in terms of Charleroi, actually, Felice Mazu, as Ben was saying, is going, couple of wins, lads. And you're looking at those last 3 games, and although there's probably, and the emphasis is on probably, some points there for them, you're not entirely sure where they're going to come from. So this is going to be really quite close, I think, in the end. They've got Westerlo away, Cercle at home, and Ghent away. And in truth, I think looking at them, all 3 of those fixtures could quite easily go either way. So I think it's probably going to go to the final weekend for them. Bruno Irles at Molenbeek has been saying this week that he really is quite confident that they can win 2 of their last 3 games. I'm glad he's confident, because I'm not. They've got a particularly big game coming up this weekend as well against Kortrijk, which we'll talk about shortly as well. But Genk deserved the points, and I think a slight improvement in form, probably just the right time.
Yeah, I can't see where they're going to get these 6 points from. I can't see where they're going to score. They only scored 2 goals in the last 5 games. If you finish the season with, I'm a big fan of his, but if you finish the season with Marco Ilamaritla as your top scorer with 4 goals, you've had a bad season. That's for him. That's a decent season that he's not a goal scoring midfielder. But it's just. I don't know. It feels weird, doesn't it? Because they're talking about the new stadium, they're talking about all this stuff, and it feels like there's this massive disconnect between what they're talking about off the pitch with what's actually happening on the pitch. And I think they need they need a shift, and need to find an identity within the team. I don't think the team has an identity that they've had in the past, where it's been they're physical, but they're not just physical up front, they're physical everywhere. And they've had a really good physical, the wingers are physical, the strikers physical, the midfield is physical. They've been quite hard to beat, because they just like to bully some teams. But this team doesn't look like they can bully anyone. They just look really, really weak. And you look at, of those 3 games, I think Westerlo is obviously the most winnable one, just because of kind of where they are on the table, and therefore maybe recently they probably are safe. Like, let's be fair. There's so many teams in between them that they still can be caught. But I think we're quite confident that they've done enough to probably survive. And it's just, but I just don't see how they're going to be able to win a game because they can't score. Like, Coffey's going to have to play really, really well to keep the ball out. And I just feel like Cercle will, like, they'll have to, if they don't win against Westerlo, they then play into Cercle's hands by having to really go for it at home against Cercle. And we've seen this before, like when teams will have a go at them, Cercle are very happy to sit back. So yeah, I don't know. I just don't know with Charleroi at all. And I think they just can't really afford to be in that bottom four because I don't think they look like they're up for it in terms of a scrap.
I think you're definitely right. We're definitely, I think, going to have one of those final days of the regular season where sides' games have finished. They know what they've done and they're running over to the touchline to check phones and iPads to see how other sides are doing. I think it's definitely going to go that way. I'd be very surprised if any of the sides in the scrap at the moment manage to dig themselves out ahead of time.
Yeah, and I think for Genk as well, I feel like it feels like they just picked up some form at the right time, doesn't it? And then that club game is pretty big, and you win that, and suddenly you're kind of looking at everything quite differently, aren't you? And I have to say, fair play to kind of come back from some of the poor form that they've been in to look a lot better now, or just at least picking up points, like scrappy points if they do, but just pick them up and take them and kind of run with it, even without kind of being Genki in terms of like the recognised striker and the guy that's scoring all the goals. It's kind of having to come from all places at the moment. Scott, you mentioned that Bruno Irles was confident in his side. And did he watch the Leuven game as well? Like, I don't know, like that. It just there's always these games, aren't there? And there's like a particular memory I always have, kind of showing signs of kind of historical references and all that nonsense. Like going back to kind of the 2000s, where it was Reading's second season in the Premier League. And we're struggling, that we need to survive. But there's always this kind of confidence that we could do it. We've got the players to do it. And then Fulham come, and that's the big game. There's this game we have against Fulham. And you just felt it in the crowd that this is the most important game of our season. If we win this, we'll probably stay up. If we don't win this, we're going down. And this game kind of had it for me in the sense of, like, for me, it felt like for the Molenbeek fans and the players, it felt like this was the game. Like, this is the one. We win this, we've definitely got a chance. But they don't. And it just felt like that to me. It's kind of like this was your big, big chance to get out of where you are. They take the lead, obviously. Eli Kamara just turns Rika, completely fools him. Discussions amongst the faithful here, the WhatsApp group. Was it bad defending or good skill? I think we kind of like saw good skill, but you should defend that better. He just beat him far too easily. Biron then tucks it in. Just massive difference having him back, isn't it, for them? He just makes such a difference, scoring some goals. He links up with everyone so much better than Gay can on his own. Like Gay, he looks big, and you feel like maybe he could be a lone striker, but he needs a partner, and he needs someone that's a little bit more kind of running around. He had a couple of good chances in this one, but Molenbeek couldn't take any more of their chances. Leuven get a corner after about half an hour. Ball comes in. Plaetings heads it in, but it could have been anyone really. Like, the defending was that bad that he was just the one on the end of it to put it in. Interesting kind of team selection, I guess we could say. John Torsteinsson, Scott, you raved about him last week. I've raved about him before. He was on the bench. I thought that was an interesting decision from Oscar Garcia. I thought in a game like this as well, would you want to kind of rest him? And maybe you've gone slightly more defensive, I guess, in your outlook on how you're going to play. But Maziz, to be fair, Maziz has started to kind of pick up in terms of goals and assists and just getting more involved in the play. So that's been quite important. Opoku started up front, and I think he missed, if I remember right, he missed a sitter, but I can't remember when it was, but I'm pretty sure he missed a sitter. He missed a couple of good chances. I can't quite remember. Molenbeek had a great chance in the second half. Gay dribbled around about 3 players, but he just kind of lost his balance at the wrong time and couldn't put enough power on it to get the ball past Leeson. Finishes 1-1, which it's obviously in terms of positioning and table and all that is worse for Molenbeek than it was for Leuven. But I feel like Leuven probably looked at this game as well, thinking this is a great chance to kind of get ourselves pushed kind of away from the drop zone. But they haven't, so they remain just a point above Charleroi, whereas Molenbeek remain 3 points behind Leuven. I don't know if you guys agree, but I just felt that was Molenbeek's best chance to kind of win that, and then you've built something to get out of it.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I remember saying a couple of weeks ago, and talking about this particular fixture from Molenbeek's point of view, and the one they've got coming up this weekend against Kortrijk. I felt that if they could beat Leuven and Kortrijk, they would then be in a pretty decent position to, in the worst case scenario, at least make the playoff spot. They've not managed to win this one, and Bruno Erles thinks he can win two of those remaining three. So there's Kortrijk, Anderlecht, and Circle. Kortrijk is the one that they absolutely have to win. Anything they get elsewhere is going to be a bonus. I don't see really any points in the final two games from them either. So yeah, I mean, I suppose from Bruno Erles' point of view, what's important here is that he remains positive, and that's actually all that matters. So even if the messaging is a little bit off, which it is from all of us looking from the outside, how he handles that camp on the inside is really important, I think. And I think there's a little bit of that psychology going on here. Molenbeek, marginally the better side, but probably not deserving to win it. And when you're playing within yourself a little bit like that, then there's a good chance you're not going to get the points. And they didn't. Looking at these two sides' fixtures, I mean, Leuven have actually got a reasonably difficult schedule for their final three games on paper. I don't see a great deal of points for them there, but the way things work, sometimes harder fixtures at this time of season are the things that squeeze slightly better performances out of things for you. I have a gut feeling, and it's just a gut feeling, that Leuven are going to escape this and perhaps be the lucky ones come the end of the regular season. And it's just a gut feeling. It's not based on anything at all I've seen or looked into. It's just a feeling I have. But yeah, things are changing week to week at the moment. And I just, to be honest with you, when you look at the sides, I don't see many points for any of them at the moment. That's why I genuinely think it's going to go to, it's going to go to the stoppage time VAR things and everyone running over to the touchlines, I was just saying.
That might happen, but I literally see no points in that. I think I will turn been saying before around, actually, like, I don't see where Leuven will grab some points, while Molenbeek, if they win that game against Kortrijk already, then they're already level to them. Okay, they probably need to scrap one more point somewhere then, but nonetheless, I'm a bit surprised that Garcia was so happy to play for the draw, basically, because this was also for them at least the most winnable game on paper, at least, of the list. And actually more for them than for Molenbeek, as we mentioned the Kortrijk game already as well. A crucial one for both sides' fates, for sure. Not that much to add for the rest. Makoso, I believe it's a debut for Molenbeek. That might be worth a mention. Just want to give him a little shout out. Kamara, the move on the first goal already discussed. Yeah, brilliant move, but yeah, especially an experienced set like Riga you can't really forgive that kind of mistake in the situation they're in. Taking the lead, Molenbeek, in both of the games that Irle has led now, which is an encouraging sign in a way, I guess. On the other hand, of course, they also don't get all the points out of either of those games, and they are still winless in 2024. But yeah, like I said, one could be enough to escape still. Probably, yeah, that might be true, but then they still will need to grab some other points, most likely. And for Leuven, then maybe just to the random fact as well, like, they scored 12 out of their 32 goals on set pieces, and only 4 of them are penalties, so that's still 25% of their goal production coming from set pieces, which sounds reasonably high. But yeah, that might say a lot about the rest of their game as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, they're just not very good. Let's be honest, they're just not very good. And this is why you should...
Which is a bit surprising, because if you look at the names, the squad is really not that bad. But yes, up front, of course, yes, we've all been saying that all season. I guess they're lacking something there. But yeah, on paper, the squad is not so bad.
You want to just shut like a Thomas Henry from back in the day in this team, don't you? Just see what would happen, because you just... like Maziz, Torsteinsson, Mertens obviously coming back now as well. Like, you think you've got those three on the pitch, you should be scoring goals. Like, those three are very, very good players. very similar players, but they're so interchangeable. You could do so many fun things with those three. The defense is like, it's always been a bit weird. Like we've been saying for years, it's like they're weird at the back and they're weird up front, but in the middle they look great. Like they have one of the better midfields that there are. It's just doesn't really click or work. And I don't know. Do you guys think Mark Bryce would keep them up? Like if he'd still been there, do you think he would, like his kind of experience and stuff at this back end of the season? Because we've seen it before where like he just would pull out random wins out of nowhere and stuff like that. Do you think Oscar Garcia is the right man to get? Do you think he's got like enough kind of tactical kind of flexibility and tactical nous to get anything out of these 3 games? Like just
that are 2 questions, of course.
I'm just chucking all the questions that come to my head.
But on Bears, I don't think so. I think like his time there was over anyway. I feel like I think the playing squad probably needed the refreshments and was not really responding to him anymore. Whether then Garcia is the right man to replace him, that's the second question there. Yeah, okay. At the moment, I would not say so because of the tactics. Not only in this game, I've seen other Leuven fans saying that like he's actually playing on these draws against the lower sides. Yeah, inexplicably, I guess. While these were the sides that they would grab the wins from. Yeah, but not saying it. He might not do it, but well, I think there are questions to be said. Even if they manage to stay up, we'll see if he will still be there anyway next season. In my opinion.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting question, that, Ben, because I think, Mark Bryce is a reasonably wily character and generally an underrated coach, I think, but he'd got himself into a very difficult position at Leuven where things had got a little bit toxic, probably with a small t. His relationship with some of the players wasn't great, I don't think. His relationship with some of the people upstairs wasn't what you would want it to be, and I think it just, the whole dynamic there was really not helpful. So maybe if some of that toxicity wasn't there, maybe they would have scraped a few more points. But I don't think fundamentally the overall situation would be that different. Joris raises a third and arguably even more interesting question in answering your one around if Leuven do stay up, and let's just say they do for a minute, is Oscar Garcia the man to be there for the longer term? Does the fact that he keeps them up win him enough favour to be given, a clean slate and a new season? I think Joris, what he's alluding to, and he'll tell me whether he was alluding to this or not, is has he done enough, even if that does happen, to persuade the playing staff and the people upstairs at the club that he's the right man longer term? Because while there have been some small marginal improvements on an individual level, I think with some players perhaps, I'm not sure things have really changed at all in terms of the dynamic inside the club or what they're bringing at all to alter the picture. But 3 really good questions.
Yeah, and of course, if he keeps them up, then he will have some more games in the other playoffs to prove himself, where there's a bit more freedom. Of course, I think that there will be a bit. Well, let's see what happens there. I guess the although I don't think that actually should play a big role, because it's not likely that they will get anything out of that playoffs. Well, okay, that's all hypothetical talk, anyways, for the moment. But yeah, but I do feel like that actually might influence the decision, while it shouldn't as well, to be honest. But yeah, I'm not very convinced. Let's put it that way. Either way.
No, and I think your point, I'll kind of double back to it later about them setting up. Like, I thought this was a defensive setup, and then hearing the fans say that that's what he does in those weak against those weaker teams, it's just bizarre. Kind of when they've got the kind of creativity in that they do have, and they're struggling. It's like you can't really defend either. So like and we'll compare. There's another coach I think that can compare quite well in terms of what we think the strength of the squad and all that sort of stuff, and kind of the issues they've had. So we'll get to that later on. Let's go to the Daiwa Wasabi Stein Stadium. A full house, it felt like, at this one for the 100th birthday of Sint-Truiden. They tried to burn the place down halfway through the game. Thankfully, they didn't. But that's one way to celebrate your birthday, I guess. And honestly, I don't know how this game didn't finish like 5-6-0 to Sint-Truiden. They just absolutely battered Westerlo. Like, they just were playing them off the park. It was just some wonderful football. Like, the goal they scored was great, but they had so many other chances to score wonderful goals. Kind of on the counter attack, some nice play down the right hand side. Koita drifts inside, flicks it back to Ito. Ito dribbles through. Looks like he probably should actually play Bocat in, but he decides not to. Goes for a chip, and Bolat's like, "It's your birthday, guys. I'm just going to give you the present," and just kind of flaps it into the back of the net. Pretty rubbish goalkeeping, to be honest. I don't know, there's moments with him where you see him and he'll make a save and you're like, oh yeah, that's why this guy's like been in this league for so long. Then he does stuff like this, you're like, how has this man been in this league for so long? He's such a roller coaster of a goalkeeper. So I'm interested to see, because obviously he wasn't number one at the start of the season. I'll be interested to see if like where they're going with the goalkeeping situation next year, because I think there probably will be a change. Westerlo really should have scored way more goals. I think they finished 15 shots, only 3 of them on target, which kind of sums up. They were missing loads of stuff, but there was something really nice about seeing that place full and then playing the entertaining football that they play. And you just hope that maybe some people be like, no, I might actually come to this a little bit more regularly now. Like, this was actually quite entertaining. Like, they all obviously came for the Hollaback game a couple of years ago, wasn't it, when they were trying to push the playoffs? But they probably were like, well, it's not very entertaining, is it? But this side's very entertaining. Like I said, should have been more than 1-0. Mad that they're both kind of next to each other in the table as well, isn't it? Like, you just think the way we see their seasons having gone and stuff like that. Obviously, there's a reasonable gap of 8 points between the two sides, but fully deserved win. Happy birthday to Binky's boys. Just need to find a way to put the ball in the back of the net more consistently, but that kind of feels like it's going to be a problem for next season now. But they can kind of just enjoy the rest of this season and spoil the party for a couple of other sides instead.
Well, the birthday party was a happy event after all. They managed to get the points. I was a bit worried, actually, as has been the case with St-Truiden for a lot of this season, that the big event was going to be spoiled either by them dropping points again or, and even worse, losing the centenary weekend game, which didn't happen. So I'm pleased for them in that sense. I'm glad Ben also mentioned the place nearly being burned down. Some people were clearly having such a great party that they thought they need to liven it up even more. I suppose the question, and Joris asked this of me and Ben at the time, is how are things like that possible? We know that there are quite tight regulations as to what sort of materials banners and stuff can be made from, and when I saw it, it went up like tissue paper. So I absolutely no idea what that was made with, but thankfully the fire brigade were on hand pretty quick. With Binky's support, but yeah, it was great atmosphere and feeling around the club this week. There was a big march to the stadium and some events in St-Truiden itself on the weekend leading up to this game. So they made a bit of a weekend of it by the looks of it, and fair play to them as well. On St-Truiden specifically, I thought Koita, Ito and Van Helden all had really strong games, really, really good games. And on Westerlo, we've been talking about how good Romeo Vermaat's been since he's gone there on loan, and they did miss him this weekend, I think, not just in an offensive sense, but that defensive work rate that he's got that I was talking about just last week in highlighting. I think things like that were missing as well. They are going to be all right, as we've been saying for ages. No worries really there for them, and yeah, they more than made their own in this game and made it a decent game, which was just as well because, it was a party.
Yeah, everything said again. Huge efficiency issue, but playing really well for Sint-Truiden in their celebration game. I had a lot of fun with that, with them burning down the whole stadium. But I'll leave it to that one sentence there. But you guys already talked about it as well. Well, not super remarkable news, but remarkable stat that I mentioned it now. I guess it doesn't matter, but they are officially safe from relegation now. So well, they were not really looking into that at the moment, I guess. But and that actually with a negative goal difference of -8 still, which is actually mad in the position that they are in. But yeah, definitely. And yeah, in a way, okay, they're now I think they're a little bit too far ahead away anyway, but they're still playing both Club Brugge and Antwerp, so yeah, they could bring themselves into this mix, playoff mix, even more. Yeah, if it's one of those or maybe both of those sides falling through in a hypothetical situation again. But yeah, they still need to play them still. For Westerlo, yeah, no chances until suddenly 4 in 1 minute. That was for yeah. They could keep on pushing the penny in, and yeah, and yeah, 4 in 1 go, hitting the bar and ball of the line as well. I believe in the same situation there from Sidorchuk, for among others. But yeah, just an off day and not helped with that injury for Vermans, indeed, and probably a few other injuries as well that we might not be talking on. But either way, they will also be fine, I guess. But yeah, the miracle that this game only ended with a 1-0 scoreline, indeed.
Yeah, I feel like I need to apologise to Sidorchuk for praising him so highly the other week because he had an absolute stinker and got replaced at half time. That they just couldn't deal in the midfield at all with Sint-Truiden. Like Ito, just like he's been one of my favourite players to watch this season. Like, he's so technically good, and he just picks the right places to stand and pick up the ball. And yes, Sidorchuk got hooked at half time, and I was just kind of like, I owe that man an apology for cursing him. Yeah, like you're right about Vermaat and stuff. It's just that Frigan, most expensive signing in their history, and he's just not really displayed that yet. Hopefully it's just kind of like he'll acclimatise and maybe over the summer get better, and DeMille can kind of work with him and get him to kind of the levels that they expected him to be. But yeah, hasn't been great. On the other side, I think kind of be nice to touch on as well, to say that like this season for Sint-Truiden has, it kind of from the outside looking in, and maybe you guys can correct me if I'm reading this wrong, it feels like the club is connecting more with the fans than it has done for a couple of years, in terms of the ownership was getting a lot of criticism for like the way they were operating and stuff like that. They didn't really kind of get the young players coming through. There was a massive disconnect. There was a heavy like kind of insistence on bringing Japanese players in, and it's kind of like no. Whereas this season they've managed to blend the two things together. You then have this, you've got entertaining football. It feels like maybe there's just been a bit more of a connect between the fans, but I don't know, maybe burning down their stadium was actually a protest because they're still not happy. I don't know. I've seen it once before, went to a Bulgarian, the Sofia derby in Bulgaria, and the fans just started burning the national stadium and setting tyres alight and stuff like that. But that, I think, was a little bit more expected than in Belgium. I think the regulations in Bulgaria are slightly looser on what you can bring into the stadium. But yeah, one side that definitely aren't safe from relegation are Kortrijk. They travelled to Mechelen on Saturday evening. And yeah, so we mentioned Oscar Garcia when he faces weaker teams, this kind of idea of kind of going a bit more defensive and stuff like that. And then kind of the impact on the squad and stuff like that. I think Besnik Harsi is kind of the example of the different, you can do it very differently. And we'll just wait for Scott to come back. There you go. Besnik Harsi is kind of, the example of how you can do it differently and you can get stuff out of a squad that's been underperforming. And he's definitely done that this season. And yeah, they were in fine form once again against Kortrijk. Kortrijk did have a couple of chances, but they just didn't take them, whereas Mechelen were happy to. Another counter-attack goal, Kortrijk set piece, gets cleared out. Antonio picks it up, eventually falls to Rob Scoofs on the halfway line. Antonio continues his run. He bursts through. We've kind of said Islam Samani is not as quick as he maybe once was. But if you watch this goal, the man, he motors on and he's catching up with Bill Antonio at some point. He's never getting there to help him finish the goal. It's a lovely finish from Bill, celebrating his new contract as well. Fantastic to see him kind of flourishing in this side at the moment. They then, in the second half, like Mechelen have had quite a few chances. They score a second goal that is just weird. I just kind of looked away because I thought, the ball's been called out. It must have gone out. But yeah, Patrick Fluke comes on, drives to the byline, crosses it in. Vandenberg just kind of like pushes it into his own goal. Really terrible goalkeeping. Like, let's be fair, really, really bad from him. Did the ball go out of play though? Like, I don't think it does when Fluke crosses it, but it just looks like it goes out and then comes back in. It's really hard. Like, I just don't know how you do that without kind of the goal line technology going all the way across the line, or like Hawkeye, like in tennis, or something like that, where you can really see it. It was a really difficult one. They gave the goal because I guess it was just it looked like it stayed in, so they decided to give it, which you'd be a bit annoyed if you're Kortrijk about. They then Mechelen get their third goal again on the counter attack. Nicholas Storm coming off the bench alongside Bilal Bafdidi. He finds Bilal Bafdidi. Bafdidi shoots, takes a little bit of a deflection, goes into the back of the net off the post. He didn't really care at all. Solid display from Mechelen. I think it's always a good sign, isn't it, Scott? When I know the FootMob ratings can be a little bit odd, but if you go on it, the lowest of your starting 11's rating is 6.8, which is like a solid average score. Everyone else in the 7s and 8s and stuff like that. Galan Nanga, I think he might become a fan favourite amongst the fans. I think he's got something about him in defence as well. He loves kind of messing around a little bit and kind of getting involved in things like that. So yeah, solid win for Mechelen. For Kortrijk, it's just they had that little bit of kind of impetus in getting stuff back, but it feels like that's it now. They just have to beat Molenbeek next week, otherwise they've probably got absolutely no chance.
Yep, another good weekend for Mechelen. I suppose they'll be hoping that the season never really ends in a way, because they've been gradually improving as we were talking about last week. Since they came back from the winter break. I have to give a big shout out to Manesh Garananga. Actually, I like him the more I see of him. I think his positioning is very good. I think his tackling is very well timed, and I think he looks like a really interesting pickup. In fact, he looks like he's been there for ages. He's settled in really, really well, and with Foulon on the other side, then they're already complementing each other really quite well. Another good weekend for them, and actually it could have been a few more in the end. Kortrijk were pretty poor, and arguably their worst performance since Freyr Alexandersson came in. He might disagree, but I just felt they didn't offer very much at all this weekend. They had a great chance to take the lead. Dion Deneuve missed a one-on-one that he couldn't even get on target. And when you're in the trouble there, and you've certainly got to take chances like that because you don't get very many like that. So pretty poor. And I thought, and regular listeners will know, I like my body language. I felt Alexandersson's body language was really interesting in the touchline. He looked pretty passive to me for somebody who's been very active both physically and vocally since he came in. I don't know. It just looked like there's been a bit of an atmosphere change in the group again. I felt Sissako had a decent game, I have to say, for Kortrijk. He was reasonably up for it, and probably should have stayed in the pitch. He had a couple of tackles where I thought against other referees he might not have been so lucky, but at least he was putting in a shift. But yeah, great 3 points for Mechelen, and for Kortrijk now it's a case of give it your all and kind of just cross your fingers and hope for the best now.
Yeah, and win that game on Saturday. I think that's the only option they have as well. That Kortrijk, all but relegation playoff official now. To no one's surprise, of course, at this rate. But I think that they are 8 points behind for, I believe. So if they win all their next 3 games in Leuven and or Charleroi and or other teams, the Eupen don't grab all more as well, many points as well, then maybe they still have a chance. But yeah, that's just not going to happen, is it? So that indeed, the Neve missing that chance. Van den Berg being back in goal, and then twice in his first 2 goals. Not looking great, as Ben already touched on a bit as well, especially the second one, of course. But the first one, I also felt like his positioning was not great there. And for Mechelen, on the other hand, all blue skies. Bafdidi first goal and a 10th clean sheet, going joint top in that classification. Who would have thought that not that long ago?
Wow, this team could defend. What is going on? Who taught this team how to defend?
I guess the answer lies in Besnik Hazi a bit as well. I think that's what he sorted out mostly. Whether that's and that's definitely something that I really need. I'm still not necessarily completely convinced about his managerial qualities, but for Mechelen at the moment, he's really been, can't argue with the stats he's bringing actually so far.
I mean, over the last 5 games, they're the third best team behind Anderlecht and Union. So that's quite something, isn't it? Whereas Kortrijk 14th, so improved a little bit, but just not enough at the moment, unfortunately. But I think we said when Alex Anderson came in, didn't we, that it's kind of like he just, if he keeps them up, amazing. If he doesn't, he was given the hardest job to do anyway. So it's kind of, you can't really fault him on what happens. Let's go to the other end of the table. I feel like we've been at the bottom for most of this chat. Let's go to the top. Let's go to Anderlecht, travelling to Club Brugge. Good start for the home side. Ferran Jukla finishing off after a cross from Nussa's headed back across by Van Aken. Jukla tucks it in. Guys, who needs Thiago Rodriguez or Igor Thiago, whatever name he wants to go by? Jukla, 4 goals in his last 4 games. He's starting to really find his form again, starting to kind of look more like the player that he had for like a brief period at the beginning of his kind of club career until these injuries. And I don't know. You just think if he's going to stay next season, that's perfectly fine. That's like more than adequate. Just find a kind of striker that can support him if he gets injured or anything. Because yeah, really nice little finish from him to make it 1-0. Anderlecht, they hang about in this one. So Club do finish the game with like 16 shots, 6 of those on target. But into the second half, late in the second half, lovely ball in from Anders Dreyer, I believe it was. So his ball in. No, sorry, this was the Torgan Hazard assist. Torgan Hazard puts the ball in. Big Louis Vasquez. He somehow managed to get himself onto Maxime de Kuiper instead of any of the centre backs, which I did read in one of the papers. They were like, well, it's not his fault, but all the goals came from Maxime de Kuiper. But it's like, well, if he's up against Louis Vasquez, like it's not his fault that he loses the header, is it? The man's like quite a bit taller than him. Lovely header from Vasquez into the back of the net. Into added time, Anderlecht on the counter attack. Augustinsson leading it. He plays it across to Anders Dreyer. Dreyer's kind of shot come cross to the back stick. The club defence falls asleep. Mignolet falls asleep. Nilsson Angulo does not fall asleep. He's there to tuck it in. I don't know if you heard on the Dutch commentary, guys, but it felt like, I don't know who the co-commentator was, just kind of let out a bit of like a, oh no, or like a sigh of kind of like annoyance. And I was like, oh, that's going to go down well, isn't it? Like, because all the other teams would have picked that one up, won't they? But yeah, no, Anderlecht just, yeah, they come out of this one with the win. Massive win for them. For club, a lot of frustration amongst the fans after this result. So you can understand, because obviously it means they're well in the fight to not make the top 6, which would be crazy. I still think they're going to do it, but it would be a little bit mental if they didn't do it. But they've only won 1 of their last 5 games. They've been dropping points, which is super frustrating for them. They're obviously still fighting on 3 fronts as well. Got a reasonably decent draw in the Europa Conference League. They've got, it is Malmo, not Mulder. I'm trying to remember which one of those 2. It's Mulder, isn't it? They've actually got Mulder, not Malmo. Always get those 2 mixed up. 2 Scandinavian teams, like just obviously in different countries. They've got Mulder. Obviously, Ronny Dyler will have been there a couple of times during his Valenga days. Should get through that. They've got a great chance of going quite deep in that competition.
Yeah, well, the big game of the weekend,
league,
depending on your persuasion.
For Anderlecht,
I was talking going into this weekend about how it's arguably still the biggest fixture in Belgian football, depending on your persuasion. I know plenty will disagree with me. You know, there are historic reasons why Anderlecht Standard is arguably the bigger fixture, but I think from an outside point of view and a non-club allegiance point of view, this is still, you know, to many the biggest fixture in Belgian football, looking in from the outside. And I was looking forward to this one, and it didn't disappoint. The opening sort of 15-20 minutes, you could really feel the old animosity that you knew was going to be there, typified by, you know, Mats Ritz getting booed every time he touched the ball by the Holmes fans, which I suppose you would kind of expect. Lots of handbags there. Anderlecht started very brightly, and I felt they were the better side throughout the entire game. I do think they deserved to win it. They stuck to their task, played their game, and ultimately were rewarded. One of the interesting things about this whole game this weekend, I think, was that I felt that Club Brugge tried to manage the game and not win it so much, whereas Anderlecht quite obviously were trying to win the game from the start. And psychologically, it was just kind of interesting. Ronny Deila has this thing sometimes in big games where he makes tactically and in terms of substitutions, things that might be perceived to be a little bit negative, and clubs' big players didn't turn up in the way that we know that they can really this weekend. And I think that let them down a little bit. Anderlecht stuck to the task, and there was a period in the second half of 15-20 minutes where it looked like the game had maybe slightly gone from Anderlecht. The energy levels dipped a bit. Brian Reimer obviously noticed this and made some substitutions, which worked quite well for them as well. But I think tactically he laid his stall out really, really well, and they deserve to win. And they're on an amazing run of form, really. I know we keep talking about how resilient and consistent Union are, but fair play to Anderlecht. I think that's a run of 16 games or something like that now. And really it's going to be them or Union, barring something rather extraordinary, I think. And the biggest question around the Brussels destination of the title, I think, is when you look at Anderlecht's 3 remaining fixtures in the regular season, they've got fixtures that if they had a choice, they would probably pick these 3. They've got Eupen, Molenbeek and Kortrijk. I don't see them dropping any points there, and I'm wondering if Union drop any in their remaining games, then that gap is going to be reduced even further, and we really will have a proper tight race again. So that's the big thing I'm looking out for. But a really strong week from Anderlecht, and they're continuing to play the Anderlecht way, and that's predominantly pretty entertaining football.
Still agree to disagree on that point, but with Scott, that last point. But this time it was definitely right, though. The no arguing there. But overall, well, let's see. But definitely they're on a good form. 4 wins in a row now as well, gaining more on the 3 teams that were behind them before this match day as well. Yeah, definitely on a roll is a word, I guess. I'm also still hesitant to just say that the title will go to Brussels, which, given there's still a 10 playoffs going on, like it's very likely. Like, I don't see, and I have no idea who that might be, but like maximum 1 team still be able to somehow jump out of that cluster of teams that are now fighting for these final playoff spots. Well, final actually for four of the 6 playoff spots even still. But also, well, it has has nothing to do with anything, but just I found it a little funny to see like a lot of Scandinavians on the pitch on both sides. But in the end, it's the Spanish speakers that have decided the games have contributed the goals and on both ends as well. So on one end actually, but for both sides at least. But Club Brugge, Ben mentioned 1 win in 5 now, sucked in that Champions playoff race in the completely wrong way. Apparently I saw like the Pro League tweeted that it was the 400th game of Hans van Aken in the Joper Pro League, like not only for Club Brugge but also for Loke, but in the league. Their first home loss in the league as well. Now the only team that is still unbeaten at home is, yes, you guessed it, Anderlecht as well. So that's also proving that point of them being in the good form, at least in points this season for a large part there. And Scott already touched on my final thing as well. Like it really looks like Dyla South can't play 90-minute games in the Belgian Pro League. Like Standard had the same issue last season, and it seems like it transferred with him to Club Brugge this season.
It's such an interesting
one. Not that
one
they were already good
this week alone. There's been a lot of certainly in Club Brugge circles that there has been a lot of criticism of Ronnie Dyla in a way that I haven't seen. I've seen, little snippets and snipes around certain choices throughout the season, but there was a lot of discontent around just his approach, and that's even kind of transferred to the atmosphere in the club, questioning other aspects that aren't even anything really to do with kind of Ronnie. So I think there is a sense that some of the fans are remain to be convinced, despite that long period where things were really looking very good for them. You're always going to be judged on, when it really matters, and it's beginning to look at the moment like they're falling short of where they would want to be going into the playoffs. And yeah, I agree with you, Ben. Let's just assume they do make a playoff 1 spot, which I think they will as well. It's just a huge week for the club all round, and it was always going to be. It started badly for them, obviously. But they've got the cup semi-final, which is tomorrow night as of recording, and then they've got Molde in Europe, and it is beginning to look now like Ronny Deila probably has to produce something either in Europe now or winning the cup in order to kind of settle things down a little bit. A lot of talk about spending a lot of money but not spending it wisely amongst the fan base and things like that. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because they started the season quite slowly, then built up a head of steam and seemed to be really coming kind of quite good. And yeah, maybe one of the wheels has come off. Maybe that's how I would describe the overall situation at the moment.
It's also going to be interesting that tie against Union in the cup, because like they're already from Union's side. A few things happened in the build-up. Burgess, of course, with this tweet from the or was it Instagram story about the far well. Yeah, okay, you don't need to go too much into that, but yeah, Bruges fans that are actually farmers based on their nickname. Arriving early on Monday already, but also Blessin now in his press conference already wrote them officially off for the title as well. Like he said realistically the cup is the only thing that they still can win this season. Probably that's a headline a bit taken out of context, I would assume, but otherwise that sounds, well, if you're as a Club Brugge player not ready for this game, I'm not sure what will get you there.
Yeah, it's so true, and it's a good thing that those fan bases love each other and really do enjoy each other's company. So I'm sure it'll be an absolutely chilled out atmosphere. I think the biggest red flag for me, and Scott, I think you've mentioned it, and I think actually both of you have mentioned it, is like, let's look at the two games where he's been really criticised of these changes. It's been the Antwerp game and it's been this game. 2 games that they were winning, 2 games that they've lost late on. I think there has to be something in that. And yeah, I think if I was a club fan, I'd be frustrated because I'd be like, they're so used to, if they're winning, it's not about, you don't settle for like kind of just the 1-0, do you? You go out and you kill the game off. You make sure you punish these teams. And we've seen them in the playoffs, that even last year, like they weren't going to win it, but they performed in it. They played spoiler and stuff like that. So the pressure is on them to still perform in the playoffs because they're used to being that team, aren't they? That comes into the playoffs. It's like, right, this is kind of, if you're an NBA fan, sort of like Miami Heat in the playoffs. Like they just think that they've got it their time. It's always their time when it comes to the playoffs. Doesn't matter who they're facing. So yeah, I'd be slightly worried if I was him, because you could then, if they don't win this cup tie against Union, you can kind of say, well, he's dropped another one, hasn't he? Because they were in a winning position, and then if they don't, so it'd be interesting. But then if he wins the Europa Conference League, it'd be quite weird to sack him if he delivers their first European title and the first Belgian side to win a European Cup for a very long time. So we'll see what happens. Speaking of Antwerp, let's go to their game against Ghent, which was actually quite entertaining, I have to say. This was quite a fun one to watch. Good atmosphere, as you'd expect, between these two sides. Ghent started on the front foot. They actually played quite well in terms of attacking wise, which is very strange because usually you're struggling to find where everything's going to come from. But I thought Archie Brown had a really, really good game on that left-hand side. That's one of the better kind of offensive games I've seen for him, really offering more, making kind of more decisive kind of choices with the ball, which I've been kind of a little bit frustrated with him. Kind of, he's got kind of all the attributes to do that, you think, but he doesn't always do it. But he did in this game. That helped kind of lead to the first goal. Some lovely play on the left-hand side. Ball comes in, it just hits Alderweireld and goes in for an own goal to make it 1-0. Ismail Kandus, probably, if Hein van Heisenberg had been on the pitch, he'd have hit him in the face and thrown him just anywhere he could find. I've never seen him that angry with a single player. And thankfully, it was all captured by the TV crew. It was fantastic. So it's just that classic Sunday League case of where the centre-back thinks he's got so much time on the ball, despite all the offensive players kind of being around him and stuff. He takes a massive heavy touch. I think, is it Yusuf that Nixon goes in and takes the ball ahead of him? And he just boots him because he's going to boot the ball. But if he didn't need to take the first touch. He just needs to clear the ball, which is exactly what Hein was saying, but probably in less polite words than that. He was absolutely steaming on the bench. Like, he was shouting at anyone that would listen. Like, all his assistants got the chat from him. If it had the teapot, the hairdryer, the treatment, all that sort of stuff. it was pretty bad from Kandus, I have to say. And Yusuf, actually, I'm pretty sure he did something similar, but in the AFCON to give away a penalty against one of the teams. So he learned from his own mistakes. But yeah, on Dredska this time decided to take the penalty. Gilly Janssen and Alderweireld are not to be trusted with the penalties anymore. Ondrejka steps up to put this one in to make it 1-1. Although Schmidt could have maybe saved it. I don't know. He did get there. He just couldn't quite keep it out. But the parity didn't last very long. Archie Brown again with the ball in. Peter Gerkens just beating very, very lackadaisical Antwerp defenders to the ball to make it 2-1 to Ghent. Once again, no second half or no more than 45 minutes for Mamadou Sonko. He is very much on a minutes restriction. He literally is not allowed to play more than 45 minutes. I think that's fair. He does not look at the pace at all. He looks really, really off it. So I've just decided this season I'm not even going to judge him at all on any of his performances. I think we wait for next season. I think it'd be ridiculous to judge a man that's just, he clearly has not had the kind of pre-season that he needs to come straight into a regular season like this. It's just really unfair. But I think they're doing the right thing by at least getting him on the pitch and getting him kind of used to the Belgian game and stuff like that. He comes off at half time. Ghent continue to have a ridiculous amount of chances. They finished this game with 13 shots, but they actually was at 2.51, which is pretty high. Antwerp's is 2, to be fair. So it's like there were chances in this game. They bring on George Ilahina and he makes it level in the 84th minute. Again, it's just all these crosses coming in that just people didn't seem to be able to deal with this weekend. Everyone falls asleep. I think it's Nurio who's guarding him and this marking him guarding. My basketball chat's just coming into my head there. This is ridiculous. Marking him, let's be kind of football chat.
Well, he was not doing it, either one of
them. Yeah, he wouldn't do anything. Whatever you want to say, he didn't do it. Look at Ina, kind of like Gherkin's got. It was very similar, wasn't it? Just like stuck in and put it in the back of the net. Hein, again, absolutely livid because it's just that would have been a massive, massive 3 points for them. Would have been a massive loss for Antwerp as well, just in terms of how that would have shifted everything in the top 6. And then Ghent drop out of the top 6 after that result. Antwerp stay on 45 points just behind Club Brugge. Good game. I really enjoyed this one. Fantastic game to watch. And this is what we want to see in the playoffs if all these sides are going to get in there.
Yeah, it was a really good game. And considering the amount of chances that both sides missed, a draw was probably the fair result. But if Ghent had taken their chances, then they would have won this game, I think, no matter how many Antwerp would have scored. This has kind of been the story of Ghent for a few weeks now, since the wheels have come off there a bit, since we've come back after the winter break, and they haven't gone back on. They've had great spells in games where they just haven't taken chances, which if they had done, they would be in a much better state than they're in. And we have a situation now where Big Hein, who we've learnt this week, is almost certainly not going to be there next year. Big Hein and the new owners, or owner, again, Sam Barrow, don't particularly see eye to eye on a number of things, I don't think. And Sam has decided that Big Hein is not his man for the future. So that contract will run down and they'll shake hands like gentlemen, I'm sure. It's interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, Big Hein's relationship with the club has been founded on a close relationship with Louis and De Witt for such a long time, and now that they are not the main movers at the club, then the whole dynamics there are kind of shifting. Fascinating week for the Buffaloes, I think. Peter Gerkens had a really good game against his former club. Some people don't think he should have been on the park. In the end, there was a particular tackle that a lot of people were screaming for a straight red for. I don't think it was a red, actually. It was reckless and he lost control, but I don't think it's quite as bad as some people wanted to make out it to be. On the other hand, for Antwerp, Ondrejka had a really good game, I felt. Big shout out to him. And yeah, Ben's right. I mean, here are two big hitters who are really going for it in this game. And, this is what we like to see in the playoffs. So, if people go into these games with an attitude like this, then most of the games in the playoffs should be pretty good.
Yeah, Van Hazenbroek. Well, we already heard some noise from an interview from Sambaro that before the game that it was not really looking well. through the lines, you could read that that the relationship was not going to be was great, and that Van Azenbroek probably would leave at the end of the season, or would not be prolonged. And well, Van Hazenbroek was quite livid after the game, and also throwing players under the bus and all. Like I don't think he cares anymore as well in a way. Like he's never been shy of a comment or a moan or anything. Of course, we know that he's always entertaining, but yeah, he might have gone a bit far here. Especially on the putter, I believe it was in the miss that he had in the final minutes. Yeah, just and yeah, obviously the Kandus reaction, which I can understand. Kandus, it's not the first time this season already as well. Like he's not been as reliable as that at least Van Azenbroek wants him to be. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, nonetheless, that he was really in such rage mode this week. Well, and okay, of course, the circumstances were there, of course, as well, like being kicked out of Europe as well in this game where they really should have won. Yeah, okay, Antwerp did get that expected goals of 2 then maybe, but that's of course including that penalty that's taking almost half of that expected goals, and they gave it away. Well, Kandus gave it away easily, of course. Also, the last time Gent have won at home against Antwerp is also an interesting statistic. Yeah, people following the Dutch media will know this one. Maybe the Dutch-speaking media, the other one, the French-speaking maybe as well. But I'm curious if you guys know. When was the last time? Take your guess.
Whoa.
4 years.
I'm not saying anything yet.
I'm guessing it's not. They've not done it since Antwerp came back into the Pro League. So what?
That's already that's definitely true. So yeah, okay, that also that's already an explanation of half why that's so long, of course. But they have won on the 1st of October in 2000. So only once. I would assume.
Wild. That's wild.
I assume only once, maybe twice in this decade, century even. So far, no, in decade not even obviously, but. Yeah, and like I said, yeah, performance was actually better from Gent, I felt, but yeah, they are nonetheless now out of the for the moment out of the Champions playoffs as well, by the narrowest of the of distance, of course. And yeah, I also wanted to mention Gerkes. Scott already took the word of my mouth there as well, scoring against his former side. Yeah, but I might have needed to get a red card. I also, actually, in Club Brugge Anderlecht, there were also a few phases where, well, the referees were quite lenient, so I guess that also went into this game. But there was a phase, the most controversy, I think, was even against Bataille with a challenge on the ankle of a Gent player. I'm so bad with names. But, well, anyway, let's not talk too much about the referees here, I guess. But worth mentioning still also that both sides still have to play Union as well. So that already reveals a little bit about how tough Union's schedule actually still is. But also, yeah, that there's no easy way into this Champions playoffs for either of those sides either, I guess.
Yeah, it's going to be a slog. And just touching on that European game, that was one of the most frustrating things I've ever sat and watched. It was so... They had so many chances. I've never seen over 2 legs aside absolutely batter someone without actually winning either of the things. It was just... And I did, like... Okay, I get it, like, why they made the decision about not having the fans there. But you just felt at the end, they probably would have scored if the fans were there. That the atmosphere that would have been created, like, they were just pumping, like, Maccabi were under so much pressure. And they just couldn't find. And you just felt if the fans had been there, like the intensity would have been even higher and stuff like that. But alas, it just felt like that was going to. I feel like if they'd kept all the players they had in January, because we saw what they did last season to that. Was it Istanbul Başakşehir, where they just destroyed them in that away game? They would have destroyed them in this one. Like Kuipers would have probably scored a hat trick. Like they had so many chances in this one. So that was really frustrating and absolutely kind of dropped kind of chance. But they weren't really going to do much in that competition anyway. Let's be fair. Like they that was the easiest game they probably would have had going through. I don't even know who Maccabi Haifa, forget, was it Fiorentina or someone like that in the next round? So they'd have probably lost that one anyway. You always mentioned Union's schedule. They probably had then their easiest game of that kind of run-in almost when they faced Standard Liège at home. Took them about 35 minutes to score. Took a bit of VAR as well. Initially, it's a foul on Dennis Eckert, I think, if I remember. Again, I'm rubbish with kind of remembering who gets fouled what. There's been some talk about whether it was or wasn't a penalty. I just presumed it was when I saw it. It just looked like a stupid tackle in the box, reckless, incredibly unnecessary. Nielsen steps up to take the eventual penalty. He finds the back of the net to make it 1-0. The second goal, there's no argument about. This is a fantastic goal, just kind of playing from back to front by Union, just completely taking Standard apart. Ball eventually finds Nielsen running the channel, which is, always nice to see a big man doing a little bit of a channel run. His ball in is just first timed with Dennis Eckert. Got a similar finish to Yura Saw, just kind of that, just you take that touch and just flick it beyond the goalkeeper. At that point, I think if you're Union, you're like, we could just probably go on and kill this game off. The referee was getting abuse from people in the stands, notably from the Standard Liège affinity, which got caught on camera, and he's had to since apologise, which I thought was quite funny. But then probably the biggest shock of the weekend, Scott, you kind of mentioned you were shocked when it happened. Moussa Djenepo scored a goal. Oh, I'm so happy for the man. Not the prettiest of goals, goes through a crowd to find its way into the back of the net, but it's nice to see Moussa Djenepo getting a goal. He came on at half time, so it's quite nice for him to kind of contribute there. They couldn't get back into the game fully though. They had a couple of chances and all that, but they just could not find the back of the net to make it 2-2. So Union get another win. Standard, I guess they're probably quite happy that this weekend the results went the way they did in terms of all the other clubs below them, because no one was able to catch up with them in terms of point. Only Leuven kind of got a little bit closer to them in terms of like dragging them all the way back in and can overtake them next up. So not the worst weekend for them to lose, but if they could have just scraped a point or two, they'd feel a lot better.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Ben was talking there about the abuse directed towards the referee from I think it was Pierre Locht, wasn't it? Who had no idea that the camera was on him. I don't know why, because the camera's on, most of these people most of the time, and he was, in fact, you could literally actually tell what he was saying, and I'm not going to repeat it here, but it was quite funny because he was sitting beside Fergal Harkin, who was very sombre and had his head down slightly, and it was all very composed, while Pierre Locht, Standard's president, was losing his shit a bit, and he has since apologised for it. But I think that speaks more to the pressure that the club are feeling internally at the moment. He sees them concede a penalty that, I, like Ben, I thought it was a penalty at the time now, but having seen it since, I kind of have some sympathy with Pierre Locht a little bit. And if you're in that situation, you can't really afford to kind of concede penalties where you're going to be up against a side who kind of score goals for fun. It's worth pointing out that Union have been conceding a little bit more than we're used to seeing recently. They're not managing to get the shutouts that they used to do, which is kind of interesting. Alexander Blesson, after this game, very intriguingly tore into his players at full time when he had them gathered together in the centre circle before they embraced the fans, as they always do at home. And I can kind of understand why, because in that second half, Union really did switch off for the majority of it. They took their foot off the pedal and really allowed Standard to have the ball. And I think psychologically it says something maybe quite interesting about what some of those players think of that opposition, that they felt at 2-0 that, the game was kind of done. Moussa Djenepo's goal was intriguing, mainly because it was one of those goals that kind of came out of nowhere. So I think he was just underlining that it doesn't matter who you're playing. Don't take your foot off the pedal. And I think the message is probably it's worth reminding them of, particularly when they've got the Big Cup semi-final coming up tomorrow evening, as we were saying earlier, where they're really going to need to be at it for the whole game. I think the first goal in that game is going to be very, very important to the outcome. Standard, again, same old problems. They came into this game probably not expecting very much. Anything would have been a bonus. Didn't really produce very much at all. Kept at it. Ivan Leko's been trying very hard this week to just kind of keep them on the straight and narrow, and just reiterate how important it is that they don't let up themselves, because they're not safe yet. I think most people think they're going to be okay, but again, other than that open fixture in the last week of the regular season, I don't see too many points for them there. Everyone in the Standard camp is confident they're going to be all right, but you can kind of feel the nervousness, and I think, unfortunately for Ivan Leko, that's what he's trying to juggle at the moment and mitigate that.
Yeah, definitely. I also think so. Standard still struggling. Will probably need that last game. I think, regardless of other results. Well, if they're really lucky, maybe with other results, they might be safe. But even if they don't get any points themselves anymore, but I doubt that really will be the case, or that you want to count on that anyway. Main thing for them, I guess, as well. Again, Van Heusden injury and a hernia. Latest is that he hopes to play the season still, though. So at least there's that. But I feel like that's really, really, especially with his injury history, I feel like that is a very, very optimistic. Really hope it's not a case, but it's really looking more and more like it, that it's just a case of like the body is just not that fit for for performing on the high level in the top sport environments. But yeah, hopefully I'm completely wrong with that. But it's everyone is asking the same question here, I think, since it's been so often lately, and from the start of his career actually. I don't have that much on Union. Well, can keep repeating this stat so far: 21 games and counting. And also, we know with their bonus system that all their players will benefit from that as well. If they win more games in a row, their bonuses get higher with every game as well. So they'll be happy about that. Was regardless of whether it was one or not, it's really a question of if. Does Eckert actually get a touch or not? There, of course, you guys both touched on it. Like, was it one like that? You thought it was one? I think it is, but like it's really difficult to see if he gets a touch, and if he doesn't, well, then no. Of course, that's a bit. Yeah, it's difficult one to judge. But regardless of that, was their 13th penalty of the season already. That is also a lot anyway, regardless of correct or non-incorrect or anything. It's just a high number. Just wanted to mention that without anything conclusions on that or anything, but except maybe they come into the box a lot. I guess you can say that.
No, they definitely do, and they did that against Eintracht Frankfurt obviously last week. That was a fantastic performance, winning there. Dennis Eckart's goal, the second goal, is so good. It's such a good goal. Absolutely just smashes it on the volley at the back post. Really, really nice goal. I can see why Blessing, I think he probably just wanted to remind them, didn't he? He's like, come on now, that we can't afford to kind of like coast through if we want to keep challenging at every level. Saw Stipe Prelika come on in the second half. That was a kind of like,
you're still there as well.
That's the thing with this club, isn't it? There's so many times, like every season, isn't it? We're like, obviously we've joked about Leifis always being there. He's like constantly there, despite always being apparently he's going to leave. Then you're like, Prelika's still there. Like, they have bought some proper dross kind of stuff over the last couple of years, haven't they? That they just can't get rid of them because they pay them this money.
That's exactly it. I mean, obviously they're trying to kind of clear out players that they don't see as having a future there. We saw the weird scenario this week as well of Bakari, who had agreed with Fergal Harkin to terminate his contract, and the board went, no, he's going to see his deal out. And you're thinking, surely it makes sense to let him go, you know what I mean? And then that money becomes available for you to use again in the summer rather than waiting. It just, you've got a player sitting around being unhappy as well. It's just, it's really strange.
But he's even stranger as well, because I think he's better than Leifis and has been this season. He's actually been reasonably useful. Wasn't there also something that someone said he was ill, and he's like, I'm not ill. I can play. I'm just not being allowed to play. So yeah, they need to clear out, but they need to clear out. We say this kind of every year, because all these loan players will disappear probably because they can't earn any money. But then they're paying people like Prelika, he wasn't good enough. He's like 28, it's not like he's young. Just he's not good enough, and they can't get rid of him. So yeah, and then Van Huysen, it really is sad, isn't it? Because there's these players throughout kind of footballing history who just they're quality, but they just don't. Their body just cannot cope. Like you look at like Ledley King's probably one of the best examples, isn't it? Like he literally couldn't train. He was such a good central defender, but he just couldn't train. Reading we had Anton Ferdinand, Rio's brother, and you were worried watching the warm up. You're like, the man's going to get injured just warming up. He just can't. Like very, very good player, like very intelligent footballer, like really, really good. And it's usually the centre backs, isn't it? What we're talking about, they just can't. You have to be so like physically ready. So it will be the same. But hopefully, like Joris said, hopefully it's just another like he'll just keep getting through them, and eventually he will get there. But it feels kind of like it's a constant with him, and it's really quite a shame.
It's also, especially with this one, but some of the previous ones about the way he falls, like it's a bit weird. Like I don't know if there is anything you can do about that, like to have some judo training or anything. I don't know, like other players. I don't know. But I assume that they would already have tried something like that at least by now. But although you don't want to really, it's a bit weird of a concept, I guess. But like. Yeah, maybe it's not the worst idea.
You're going to have started something here because, like, only a couple of years ago, we thought the idea of having a throwing coach was the most ridiculous thing in the world. But now that's kind of like a thing that people do. So maybe they're going to have how to fall over and not get injured coaches, like judo coaches, just suddenly being drafted into like top flight clubs. But who knows? Let's go to Eupen then. Haven't scored for. I worked it out the other day. They have not scored since
6, I think it is. 6 games now, I think.
Another one of those stats that keep count. You can keep counting every week.
Might be kind of just stick it in the books for the whole season. They welcomed Cercle Bruges to the Kerveg Stadion. Obviously didn't win. Didn't score. He's trying, Florian. He is trying. He's mixing everything up to see what can happen. Emond back, as Scott said, the man with the longest cold that's ever existed. He's just back out of nowhere. Felt like he was out for ages. Didn't really do anything. To be fair, I thought one of these stats was absolutely ridiculous from this game. Edgars Utkus, the Lithuanian defender for Cercle Bruges, he had 14 aerial duels, which is quite a lot of aerial dueling to do. He won all 14 of them. That's insane. I think overall, according to Football, but I don't know how they register all these things, but the aerial ones I can kind of understand. The rest of them I don't. But they said he had 20 duels and he only lost 2 of them. Like, absolute monster performance from him. They were very happy with Eupen going direct and long because Popovic, Utkus and Darland are pretty well accustomed in the air, and they probably have to face that in training every week anyway with Denki and the like, so they're more than happy to deal with that. For Cercle, though, they didn't really get going until the second half. It was the link-up play between, I believe it was Augusto, who starts to get a bit more game time. He finds Denki running kind of across the defenders. Nice run from him, and he just puts it kind of back the other way. It felt like one of those finishes you watch that like the pundits would be like, the man just knows where the goal is. He doesn't really have to look, sort of thing. I feel like he's in that sort of form, isn't he? Where he just kind of knows where it is. You just felt it was inevitable that he would eventually score against this defence. They then decided to help him anyway. They were like, well, you've had one, why not have a second? I can't remember which one of it's either Fillon or Palsson. It doesn't really matter which one it is, but there's no danger or anything. And he just runs past the ball. I've seen it back in the day. We had a player, Jimmy Kebe. You'd always know if he was going to be good or not if he took the ball with him on his first run. If he left the ball behind, you're like, he's having a bad day. So Palsson or Fillon, one of them left the ball behind. Denki was like, well, I'll take that. And yeah, he's running in. He's just a one-on-one situation. He's running in. He's got, I believe it's Minder next to him. So he could lay it off, but Sladina doesn't make him make that decision. He just stands in his goal. Like, it was really weird. It felt like you've just put this kid in goal that doesn't actually know what he's doing. It was strange because he's like a very good goalkeeper, and we've seen some good moments from him, but he just doesn't come out to kind of narrow the angle down, and Denki just has to kind of like walk it in and then shoot. He's got all the goal to aim at. He doesn't narrow it down at all. And yeah, I know it's annoying, like if you came out and he plays it across to Minder, but better to be beaten that way than just letting him walk into the goal, because he still had the pass on anyway. Like, he could have done anything. You didn't force him to make a different decision. There was literally no pressure. It was really, really weird. And I kept watching it to see if he just doesn't narrow the angle down at all. Very, very strange. Circle win, obviously. Good to see Abby Francis getting back on the pitch at the end as well. Had a haircut though. I didn't recognise him at first. He's kind of trimmed it all back a bit since coming back, so that was nice to see. For Circle, it was kind of the best team they could have played, with kind of the sides all kind of that had picked up points around them for the top six. If they could have picked a team, I think they'd have picked Erpen, because Erpen at the moment are the worst side in the league. Like, they're worse than Kortrijk in terms of form and stuff. They can't score. I think they're gone. I don't really give them any hope of staying up at all. I just think, kind of like we spoke about Charleroi, there's no really real identity. There's no identity in this team. There's no real fight. There's no quality. There's just nothing really there, is it? It just looks like a Challenger Pro League side in rating, and I don't think they'd get promoted from the Challenger with this team. Like, I don't think they'd be better than some of the teams we've seen down there. I think there's more individual quality in some of those other sides than this lot. So, yeah, I think this just kind of confirmed it, didn't it? And for Circle, it's just, I wish we could play for the next couple of games, because then we'd be guaranteed of a top six.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think this, to some extent, as far as Erpen's concerned anyway, is a lesson in what happens when you don't continually invest in a side. And that doesn't necessarily mean spending a lot of money each summer in preparation for each year. It just means, like, generally, or having much of a plan beyond, let's try and stay competitive enough to maintain our Pro League position, because the reality is things are going to catch up with you at some point. And I agree with Ben, we said it last week as well. I think this is the year where all of that is going to come back to bite them. Ben mentioned Utkus's 14 aerial header duels. In the entire game, Circle had 51 aerial duels, of which they won 61%. So Edgaris is responsible for, a very, very healthy chunk of them, and was bossing things with his head. That's for sure this weekend. Circle getting the job done in the end, much better in the second half, as Ben was saying. I think probably there were some reasonably strong words about upping the intensity, I think, in the second half, to allow them to get the job done. Kevin Denke being given, a gift, certainly for one of them. And Ben's right, there's just, he just exudes confidence at the moment. He's feeling good about himself, which in lots of ways is worth remarking on what we did a few weeks ago. This is something worth highlighting in itself, because obviously Kevin's mum passed away recently, unexpectedly, and obviously everyone at the club, as I was saying at the time, was kind of quite worried about him. And, from a slightly selfish point of view, they're thinking, what does this mean for us? Because, he's so important to us, and he hasn't let it affect his football. And I think he's probably channeled some of that, I suspect, into his football, which is worked for everybody, and that's a great thing. But yeah, he's been really not a surprise, but a revelation in terms of his consistency this season. He was always going to do very well, I think, but I didn't honestly think he was going to probably end up being top scorer, which I think he will now. And the value of him, as we've remarked recently, is actually increasing week on week as well. And Rember Romant's phone, the technical director at Circle, that I'm sure will be kind of ringing quite a lot just now with the usual, tell me a little bit more about Kevin's situation.
Well, he scored 22 goals of their 38, so he's Mr. 57%. So I'll add that they can tell them for sure. Also, he is suspended next week against Mechelen, so that's actually maybe for them the most important part. The most in what on paper is the most difficult game left before the playoffs. They will be missing him, so 57% of their goal production. And Van der Bruggen as well is also suspended, even one extra game as well. But I suppose they have a bit more players there that in quantity that they can use there. You think actually in quantity as well, but yeah, we'll have to see. Some of them have actually already shown some glimpses, like Olaigbe as well. But yeah, so it's just a bit of a probably the worst game they would want to miss him in for so far, I guess. Nonetheless, that's of course. So it's 22 goals, and yeah, these quite a routine win here, I guess. For Eupen, probably the second team that is, between quotation marks, certain of relegation playoffs now. Of course, mathematically, that's not the case, but yeah. Mathematically, they're also still in a better position than Kortrijk, but I'm not sure if that will stay for long either. The only other thing I wanted to mention is, well, I don't know if it's a positive, but since I already gave a shout out as well to other debutants this week, how is his name? Filarizo debut. I hope I did not butcher that. I'm sorry if I did, but always good to see academy players making their debut. So that's a not at least neutral notes I wanted to get for Eupen's point of view there, of course, as well. And we'll see if they really are in the when will they ever score a goal again? Place your bets.
Maybe never. I don't know. It's funny that the only positive we can say is that a kid came on in the 83rd minute. That just kind of sums it up. And just on kind of on the Denk, so last year he scored 11 goals in the league. But he actually had like 9 assists, and I think that was part of his game that was really, really good last year with his link up with Ueda. Like, how many times do we see them play that long throw in into him? He holds it up, flicks around, Ueda smashes it in. He's now transitioned into being the goal scorer, isn't it? So it's really kind of interesting to see, and it's like if you're scouting him, you kind of can see what he can do either or now. You can kind of put him in either kind of situation. And I saw some talk about like Club Brugge were interested in him, and I was like, I can't imagine Circle ever selling a player in like to Club Brugge in that situation. I feel like they're gonna send him abroad, aren't they? Like that's kind of they'll wait until they get that offer from. Like I know Betis have been interested. There's a couple of Spanish sides interested. Like I'd be very surprised if he goes next door. It'd have to take quite a lot of money to do that. So
arguably. They might have more money than the Spanish sides, though. Even
yeah, well, I mean, the way they're going at the moment, yeah. But I wonder. I feel like they'd probably just be like, "No, we're sending you to Spain, mate. We don't want to see you kind of every day, but in the black and blue instead." But yeah, good win for them, and yeah, Big Kev doing Big Kev things. Scott, Challenger. Let's go to the Challenger, where Eupen probably will be, and Kortrijk probably will be next season.
Yeah, well, we've now got a situation. We've reached Matchday 23, so 7 games left before the end of the regular season. There are now only 7 points separating the top 8. It's getting tighter all the time there. And interestingly, some of the sides at the top dropped points this weekend. So Patro Eisden beat Liers 3-0. More on them in a second because they have appointed a new T1. Beveren and Denza played out a quite an entertaining 2-2 draw. Anderlecht Futures got 3 points. They beat Dender 2-1. RFC Liège and SL16 in the local Liège derby finished 1 each. That was a bit feisty. RFC Liège have now been fined €10,000 and their fans have been banned from the next 3 away games because of the interruption literally right at the end of the game. Collective punishment. That's a discussion for another time. Oostend lost at home 4-1 to Club Next. Beerschot dropped points surprisingly at home to Serang. That finished goalless. Jong Genk and Lommel finished 1 each in the Limburg derby. And perhaps the biggest surprise of the weekend in terms of results was Zulte Waregem dropping points away to Frank Baran, who managed to win 2-1. So the big winners of the weekend really are probably Patro Eisden. They're now up to 3rd because Beerschot and Denza dropped points. Zulte, courtesy of that surprise loss, have now dropped down to 4th. And the pressure on Vincent Everard is rising slightly. You know, it rose a couple of weeks ago, I think, because of some things that were said. And things are looking a bit tricky there at the moment. Serang and SL16 remain in the drop zone. And are both in pretty big trouble, and I think are probably big favourites to disappear. I mentioned Liers. They do have a new T1. It's Sven van den Broek, 44-year-old Belgian, who has spent the last 8 years of his career in Africa, in different guises and different roles. I think the biggest feather in his cap is perhaps winning AFCON as assistant to Hugo Bruce at Cameroon. That was 2016 2017. But he's also he's won the league in Tanzania with Simba. And the domestic cup there, and also won a domestic cup in Morocco. So he's spent a long time since he retired as a player. Of course, played for Mechelen and Lierse as well for a 2 or 3 year period. So he knows the club. Coming back home to Belgium, and is now ready to step up and, as he said, make a name for himself in his home country. So he's getting dropped in at the deep end because they still need some points just to make sure they maintain their Pro League Challenger Pro League status.
Let's hope we see a couple of Simba players making their way over to the Challenger Pro League. That'd be quite fun. There's a big club as well. That's a very big club to have managed in Tanzania, and then managing Morocco, like that's going to be fun as well. So I don't think he'll be daunted by managing the Challenger, but he's definitely got a challenge on his hands. You just look at that kind of, let's go 1 to 8, I guess, because Beveren obviously still in the hunt to go up. Only one of those sides won this weekend. Like, they're all kind of bottling it in their own little ways, aren't they? That they're all getting a little bit nervous. They're all getting a little bit jittery. Like Zolta, you'd have thought they've kind of had it in the bag most of the season. They appeared to be kind of very, very much coasting through. You just start to mess around a bit in that league, and you just don't know what's going to happen. So it's just going to like we've said it a couple of times now. The playoffs are going to be a bloodbath in that league. It is going to be, because the sides that are going to miss out are going to be really frustrated, and then there'll be a couple of like surprise kind of packages, I guess, like Dender or RFC. I guess they're kind of, it's a complete free hit, the players for them. There's absolutely no pressure on them getting promoted. Although with RFC they've obviously got these new kind of investors coming in and stuff like that, so maybe they'll be like, oh, we've bitten off a bit more than we can chew if we get promoted, because now we've got to fund a Pro League side instead of a Challenger side. It's all hotting up in the Challenger, that's for sure. I think that's it for this week's episode, guys. As always, it's been a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next week, and enjoy the Cup semi-finals if you get a chance to watch them.
Nothing to add there. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your week.
Yeah, absolutely. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the podcast. If you have, leave us a review on your podcast app of choice. If you've liked it more and you've already given us a rating, you can always buy us a coffee at Buy Me a Coffee. Just search Belgian Football Podcast and you'll find us on that as well. Any questions you have for next week's episode, please do get in touch with us in all the usual ways. And we look forward to speaking to you again very soon on another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast.